am Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this week's Trump Watch. Despite the overwhelming military defeat of the Iranian regime at the hands of the U.S. government and the Israeli government acting in partnership with each other in this war of aggression that they've launched against Iran, as the world is discovering, the war is not over. And one of the reasons it's not over is because the Iranian regime, despite the fact that many, if not most of its top officials have been killed, refuses to surrender, much to the surprise of President Trump. You'll recall that Trump demanded the unconditional surrender of the Iranian regime. And one can understand why he would do that. I mean, we're talking about the U.S. empire. This is the most powerful empire in the history of the planet. Overwhelming military prowess, along with the Israeli government, which, as we all know, is a very powerful military regime as well. And so when there were writers in the mainstream press saying, oh, this could be a terrible war for the United States. Oh, the Iranians are so powerful. Oh, my gosh, this is going to be troops, massive amounts of U.S. troops losing their lives. And I never bought that. Those of you that are familiar with my videos here on Trump Watch and my blog know that I've always held that this was going to be a cakewalk militarily. I mean, this is a third world country. And it's a third world country that's been hollowed out by sanctions, decades of economic sanctions that have terribly impoverished the Iranian people. For a regime to be strong, it depends on tax revenues so that it can, build up this huge national security state, military, intelligence complex like the United States. The United States has a lot of wealthy taxpayers, and that's what builds up this giant national security state and military empire for the U.S. government. Without those taxpayers, the U.S. government would be very, very weak. And so decade after decade, the U.S. empire has been targeting the Iranian people, just like they've been targeting the Venezuelan people and the Cuban people and North Korean people with economic sanctions that target the citizenry with poverty and with death by starvation or illness because they can't get the medicines and the medical care to treat the illnesses. And they target them with death as a way of getting regime change. The idea is that these people will be so miserable, there'll be so much economic catastrophe in that nation that they will rise up in a violent revolution, oust the regime from power, and then install a pro-U.S. dictatorship. And that's always been, a dictatorship that will do the bidding of U.S. officials, like what's going on in Venezuela right now. This is their ideal. To partner with a communist, socialist, narco-terrorist regime. They don't care as long as it's following their orders. And that's what they expected the Iranian people to do with these decades of brutal, vicious economic sanctions that were targeting children too. They target everybody in the society with death in the hopes that they'll rise up. And so when they were attacking and there was mainstream press saying, oh, this is going to be such a terrible war, I wasn't saying that. I was saying this is going to be a cakewalk militarily. I said they would establish air superiority within one day. And once they get air superiority, they can bomb to their heart's content, which they've been doing. They have total air superiority. They just fly around the country, dropping bombs here, dropping bombs there. It doesn't matter. They're just going to bomb the country to smithereens, which they've partially done, but no surrender. Trump had these visions of being President Franklin Roosevelt, where Roosevelt says, I demand unconditional surrender of the Nazi regime and the Japan regime and so forth. He had these visions of himself doing that. And, logically, one would have thought that would have happened as soon as they smash all the military bases and they knock out the Navy and they effectively neutralize the Army and the Republican Guard and all this. They decapitate the the people in charge of the regime, that there would be a surrender. Not what happened. The regime is fighting in ways that some people just didn't anticipate. And from what I understand, the Pentagon anticipated this closure of the Strait of Hormuz that has caused this global oil crisis. And they, from what I read, they told Trump this is a possibility, and Trump discounted it. I mean, this has been a war of choice from the very beginning. This is Trump and Vance and Rubio saying, we're going to go to war. That, remember, they never consulted Congress. They never got a declaration of war from Congress. This is one of the reasons why the framers required a congressional declaration of war. That's the law. That's the law of the land. That's the law that we, the people, put on them. They make us obey their laws, no matter how stupid. Like drug laws, we have to obey their laws, even though they're stupid. And they're destructive and they're tyrannical, but they still say, well, you have to obey because it's the law. Well, the Constitution is the law that we put on them. How come they're not obeying our law? And that law says you got to go to Congress, see? And one of the reasons for that is that Congress could, weigh all this stuff, say, hey, what happens if they close the Strait of Hormuz? What's going to be the effect on this? But no, Trump said, I can do this. I don't need to consult with anybody. I can come up with 10 variations on the justifications of the war. It doesn't matter. Let's do it. And so they do it. And so what they didn't anticipate is that essentially the Persians, the Iranians are saying, we're not going to surrender. You've blasted out all these military bases. You've killed, 2,000 people, including the head of the government and the subhead of the government and so forth. And their spouses. They've killed spouses and children in these bombing attacks. Now, I'm referring to the children that were killed as they were trying to kill the leaders of the country. I'm not even talking about those 175 little girls they killed. Now, I'm sure they'd say, well, we didn't mean to do that. Hey, when you're dropping bombs on a country, you've got to know that sometimes those bombs are going to fall in places they're not supposed to fall in. And not only that, they were targeting those little girls with sanctions. They were trying to kill them with sanctions for decades. And they didn't succeed. And so that's why they finally got frustrated that the sanctions were not causing the people to rise up. And Trump was encouraging people to rise up, rise up. Well, it's easy to encourage somebody to rise up, but it's not so easy to do the rising up. They don't have guns. They have gun control in this society. As I've said time and time again, these sanctions are ridiculous because they just target people with death, impoverishment, with no effect because people can't rise up. Look what happened when they rose up in protests. These were just peaceful protests, much less a revolution. They got mowed down by this tyrannical regime. 15,000 or so killed. That's enough to dissuade some people. And the U.S. has double-crossed people before. They know this. And so, during this attack where they're knocking out all the heads of the government and the military, the Navy, the whole thing, Trump was saying, rise up, this is your chance, this is your chance. Everybody stayed indoors because the Iranian regime is so structured and so fortified. They're ready for this. They're ready for any kind of uprising. They were going through the towns and cities broadcasting that if anybody rises up against the government in time of war, we're going to kill you. And so everybody's too terrified. And even Trump's acknowledging this. He says, well, I guess they're not going to rise up after all. They don't have any guns. Even he's acknowledging that. Well, okay, then get rid of the sanctions on all these countries. Now that you've come to that realization, President Trump, that people are not going to rise up and just needlessly lose their lives when they don't have guns to rise up with, lift your sanctions everywhere. They don't do any good. They just impoverish people for no reason. You're targeting innocent people with sanctions. You're not targeting the regime. They're the last to go. You're targeting innocent people just like the same mindset that guides terrorism. And it just needs to stop. It's so shocking to me that the American people, including those that go to church every Sunday, just keep tolerating this policy of economic sanctions. It's evil. It's absolutely evil. You know, I mean, I've got this series that I'm sure some of you, if not all of you, are familiar with, that I've started as a video series called The Evil Within, about these evil systems that have attached themselves to the U.S. government. And one of these evil systems is the overall evil is foreign interventionism. But as part of that is these sanctions. There's no way to justify these morally, religiously. They're targeting innocent people, including little girls, with death. How can anybody who goes to church every Sunday countenance such a thing? It boggles my mind. I don't understand it. And I'm sure we're going to hear all the same old tripe of support the troops, support the troops. Nobody's going to say, well, wait a minute, what about the victims of these wars of choice and wars of aggression? Nobody's going to pray for them. They don't matter. They don't count. And so whatever they say about these little girls, 180 or 150 that were killed in this bombing attack, nobody cares. I shouldn't say nobody, but they're foreigners. Who cared about them during the sanctions? Nobody. You know, I don't see people rising up in this country against the sanctions during all those decades of the Iranian sanctions. Nobody rose up against the Iraqi sanctions. Remember, those were killing children too. Madeleine Albright, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, said, sure, the deaths of 500,000 Iraqi children are worth regime change. They were trying to get rid of Saddam Hussein at that time and his regime. And so they were targeting innocent people, the Iraqi people, with death by starvation, and they were winning. I mean, 500,000 Iraqi children. Now, I doubt real seriously whether the number was that high. That's what 60 Minutes used as part of their question to her. She was the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. She's the official representative of the U.S. government to that world body. She speaks for the U.S. government. Nobody condemned her. Nobody criticized her. Not in the Congress, not in the mainstream press, not in the executive branch, because she was expressing their position. That, the deaths of those children are worth it. And the deaths of the Iranian children are worth it too. See, but Trump finally comes to the realization, oh my gosh, they're not going to rise up. Now, people are really upset that the Iranian regime is doing this strategy of the Strait of Hormuz, the oil crisis, worldwide global crisis. They're upset about it. They're also upset that they're attacking some of these Arab countries where they've partnered with the U.S. with military bases, because they've always sort of left those alone. They fire whenever they get in a battle. They fire, against Israel, and so they decide to fire at these military bases and other centers too. That apparently the Israeli government hit a bank right in the middle of Tehran with a bomb. So now the Iranians are saying, well, we're going to fire missiles at banks in these Arab countries where they have military bases. And so there's people in the mainstream press, the right wing, the interventionists, the ones that love all this warmongering, while they're sitting here writing their op-eds and reporting the news. They're not part of the military. They're part of the armchair warriors. They're real brave. We need to do that. We need to invade. We need to do this. And, of course, the operative pronoun is we. Now, what they really mean is the soldiers over there, including the 13 that have gotten killed for nothing, just like they killed 58,000 of my generation in the Vietnam War for nothing. But there's the right-wing interventionists are saying, this is terrible. This is terrible that the Iranians are fighting like this. And what they're saying is, you see, this proves that we were right to attack them. What? You mean the fact that they're defending themselves means that shows you that it was right to attack them? Yes, Jacob. Well, what'd you expect them to do? Surrender. They should have just surrendered, Jacob. Well, maybe, but sometimes people don't like to surrender. And they're going to fight with every weapon they have. Now, they obviously cannot defeat the U.S. empire. I doubt if any country on the planet, but much less a third world country, Grenada, Cuba, Venezuela, Mexico, there's no way they could stand up against the U.S. empire. It's too powerful. It's like the Roman Empire. Who could stand up against the Roman Empire? This is the most powerful empire. So it's surrender, which is what these right-wingers are saying. They should have surrendered, Jacob. They should. It just shows you what kind of people they are that they're not surrendering. Well, okay. But they decide to fight. Well, they're not fighting fair, Jacob. They're not fighting fair. What's fair? That they've closed the Strait of Hormuz. Well, maybe it's not fair, but maybe you should have taken that into consideration before you made this war of choice. That people are going to do things that are not fair. I mean, look at Hegseth, the Secretary of War. He says, we're going to kick them while they're down. We don't care. Now, kick them while they're down? How's that fair? I mean, in a boxing match, you don't kick the guy when he's down. You wait till he stands up and then you start hitting him again. But once he falls, you don't keep kicking him. You don't keep hitting him. And yet that's what Hegseth is doing. Well, wow, we're going to take the gloves off. Well, it seems to me that the Iranians are taking the gloves off and everybody's upset about it. Not everybody, but the right wing's upset that they're over there attacking these countries that have American military bases. I mean, why is not an American military base a legitimate target in a war? I don't get that kind of reasoning. Oh, Jacob, they're not supposed to do that. They're not. Those Arab countries haven't attacked them. Well, they've got military bases there, with the U.S. Putting those bases there, and so they're fighting with their gloves taken off with this Strait of Hormuz. I mean, they know that midterm elections are around the corner. And so you can see that the Trump people are getting a little tense, a little nervous about this whole thing because of those elections. And they thought, oh, the war was over. That unconditional surrender. And the Iranians are saying, well, not so fast. Yeah, keep dropping your bombs, but no ship's going to go through that Strait of Hormuz. And so we can see gasoline prices here in this country. There's already an affordability problem. Lots of people have trouble making ends meet now with the gasoline going up. And you know who's really freaking out over this oil thing? It's the Pentagon. I mean, they're the one. Military establishments always freak out over oil. Now, there's plenty of oil here in the United States being produced, but military establishment people always get paranoid that they don't have enough oil to maintain their military machine. I mean, that was what World War II was all about. At least, provoking the Japanese into attacking the U.S. Roosevelt put on that oil embargo, which was very effective. Here's Japan with this massive war in China, needing that oil to maintain that war machine, and here's Roosevelt provoking them by saying, "We're going to deny you your oil," and in the hopes that they would try to break out of this embargo by attacking the U.S. fleet. And it succeeded, but you see, the Japanese, they needed the oil. And so military establishments, they get freaked out. So I guarantee you the Pentagon's freaking out over this Strait of Hormuz thing, even though there's really no reason for it to freak out. But we can see the impact on it. And so they're panicking. The Trump regime, you can sense that this is not what they anticipated, even though the Pentagon told them this could happen. And they're trying to figure out what to do. And now Trump's got this Marine Expeditionary Force. What's he going to do with it? Is he going to invade Iran there at the Strait of Hormuz, take control over the land there, joining the Strait of Hormuz? I would assume that they've been mining those waters over there, presumably. I would assume they're going to have those beaches mined as well. But I'm sure the Pentagon would have that taken into consideration. And Trump's over there begging European countries to come to his assistance to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz. And these are the same countries, if I'm not mistaken, that he was badgering with his tariff campaign. Remember that? That wasn't too long ago. 20% tariff, 30% tariff on you, and this on this, trade war against you, and all that. And now he's saying, would you please come and help me, to put ships through the Strait of Hormuz? Well, I mean, I can understand why they might say no, because, and who knows how many ships want to go through there, even with the escort, because they can still get fired on, even with the escort. And so it doesn't seem like a prudent thing to do, even with a bunch of warships around you. And of course, it does subject American warships to the possibility of getting hit. If they invade there and take over Iran, now we're seeing a real quicksand now. Now you got troops on the ground there that are subject to being killed from the rest of the country of Iran. And so it's like, it's drawing them in, though. You can get the sense they're so desperate with these midterms coming along that it's just sucking them in. And you can sense that desperation. Like, what do we do? What do we do? This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't supposed to happen. Bomb them again. Bomb them again. Okay, bomb them to your heart's content. That's what they've been doing. They just bombed another island. Interestingly enough, they left Iran's oil refinery or loading docks there intact. They don't want to interfere with the oil supply, but they bombed all the military bases in there. And so, and now that the head of the FCC is threatening broadcasters. And now, if that's not an act of desperation, that they're not showing due deference to supporting the war, they're supposedly misleading the American people, these leftist radicals here in the United States. And so he's threatening them by taking away their licenses, their broadcast licenses, or not renewing it. You see, this goes to show you what licensure is all about. They say, oh no, broadcasters need licenses. Boy, you don't need licenses. You can just sell the broadcast rights on that band. The licensure is control. It's just like hairdressing licensure or lawyer licensure or doctor licensure. Licensure is government control. That's where they have control. And so now you're seeing it in the broadcast era. This is what libertarians have always said. It's a means of control over the news media. Why don't they license newspapers too? I'm sure they would love to. But hey, in a free society, Mr. Carr, he's the FCC chairman, people have a right to broadcast whatever they want. Okay, even if it's not to your liking as far as this war goes. That's what freedom is. Okay, it's not just broadcasting what you think is responsible or correct. It's broadcasting anything you want. But it's not true. Well, you let people decide that. That's what the free market is. If people say, well, that's just not true that they're broadcasting, don't listen to that station. Don't buy advertising on the station. That's the way a free society works. So, where's this going? Well, I think it's impossible for anybody to know. But Trump says, well, I want to end the war. The war's over. Well, he doesn't have unconditional surrender, though. And he says, so if he walks away, well, the regime's still in power. And they've got all that nuclear material there to build nuclear bombs, which was, of course, one of their justifications that, the same thing we heard with the WMDs in Iraq, that the mushroom clouds are going to be over American cities in a couple of weeks, and just such nonsense. But this is the way they scare people. In a national security state, fear is the corner of the realm. You got to keep people scared. And so that was what the whole nuclear stuff is. But I was reading where the Iranians are really distraught at this point. I mean, they're saying we may end up with a worse situation. We got a bombed out country. We got the sanctions that the national security state here in the United States will continue on with Trump's support. And so they're going to be impoverished even more. They're going to be dying from the sanctions. And the same regime, they're saying their lives are worse. And they're scared to death. They're not leaving their house to protest. And Trump's already saying that, well, I can understand why they wouldn't leave the house and protest. So, it's just the whole history of U.S. foreign interventionism. I mean, it's just a dark history. And that's part of my series, The Evil Within, that I would invite y'all to watch if you haven't seen it. I've done 3 parts. Part 4 will deal with another evil that's attached itself to the U.S. government. So that brings you up to date on Iran. We'll see how things go. Let me talk about Venezuela, though. That situation still is very, very interesting. María Corina Machado, as y'all know, as I've reported here in the past, she says she's going to go back to Venezuela. She's the leader of the dissidents, and I've said over, I don't think so. That this is a communist, socialist, narco-terrorist regime that the U.S. empire is partnering with. This is not a nice regime. This is a brutal regime, a vicious regime. And if she goes back, they'll kill her. I mean, they will kill. They'll get somebody else to do it, some lone nut assassin. Oh, it's just a lone nut. We didn't know. Oh, yeah, and then they'll kill him. If she goes back and just publicly starts organizing demonstrations like this is a free country now that the U.S. is controlling it, she is not a wise woman. I mean, if she goes back, she ought to go back and clandestinely, that's not a word, but hidden. She needs to hide herself in the distance. This is not a free country. They will kill her. She's under indictment there for being a traitor. And in their eyes, she is a traitor. She's supporting the U.S. government in all this, the kidnapping of their president. And guess what happened? She had a meeting recently with President Trump. And guess what Trump told her? Don't go back. Now, he didn't order her not to go back, but he said, he and I think Rubio was part of this meeting saying, this is not a good idea. And it isn't. I mean, credit Trump. I mean, he's telling her this is not a good idea. Now, she still, and her supporters, have not had the courage to take on Trump directly. She keeps, being subservient to him. Trump ought to do the right thing, give her back the Nobel Prize. I mean, does Trump really still think that he deserves a Nobel Prize after this war of aggression, undeclared war of aggression, illegal, unconstitutional war of aggression against Iran, and the military attack on Venezuela without a declaration of war? Does he really think he deserves it? And so, I mean, what's he doing with that Nobel Prize? Is he hanging it up in the White House saying, this is my Nobel Prize, I'm a Nobel Prize winner? What's he doing with her Nobel Prize? The whole thing is so weird. She ought to ask for it back. But she doesn't dare take him on. She's still, praising him. And her supporters, too, they're silent. Oh, they're all talking about how, María Corina Machado, how she's the head of the dissidents and how her side won the election. But they don't dare criticize Trump and the national security establishment. It's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. In the face of a narco-terrorist, socialist, communist regime that they've criticized for decades, ever since Hugo Chavez took over, they're now silent. They don't even criticize the regime. Now, she does to a certain extent. She says, oh, well, Delcy Rodriguez has not released all the dissidents. She's still holding some. Well, duh. But let me read you what President Trump said. I mean, this is just shocking. I mean, how María Corina Machado can keep playing this game is beyond me. He says, this is Trump. This is from the New York Times. We have a great situation going over there. Talk about Venezuela. With a wonderful president-elect, Delcy. President-elect? When was Delcy Rodriguez elected? They haven't had elections there. And then the 2024 election was all crooked. I mean, the other side won, crooked in the sense that they didn't honor the results. Machado's side, headed by a guy named, I always forget his name, he's over in Spain right now in exile, but he was just a stand-in for her because they wouldn't let her run because they knew she'd win about 95% of the vote. But he won legitimately, and so she was the vice president under Maduro, who's been kidnapped and is now sitting in a prison in New York. But she was never elected. She was appointed. So I don't know what Trump is getting at here. Then days later, he says, and she's doing a great job. They're all doing a good job. Okay? This is the narco-terrorist regime. The Minister of the Interior is under indictment for drug law violations in the U.S. She's under investigation by the DEA, or at least was. And so Trump said at an event at the White House last week, days later, the State Department filed a document with a U.S. court recognizing Ms. Rodriguez, who has never held elected office, as the country's ruler. So he's saying she's the ruler, the legitimate ruler, that the empire has spoken. And so María Corina Machado, she won't criticize that. Oh, thank you, President Trump. You're slowly transitioning to democracy. What? Now, he told her that she wasn't safe there because things are unstable. Well, if they're unstable, why is he praising it so much? But, I mean, how could he align? How can all these right-wing people, it really goes to show you the moral degradation of the right-wing movement, because they're all supporting him, all the MAGA people. They don't see anything wrong with partnering with a communist socialist regime, narco-terrorist regime, brutal regime that jails protesters and so forth. But I mean, it brings to mind Trump's relationship with North Korea. Remember that in his first term, where he said that he and the North Korean communist dictator Kim Jong-un, they fell in love. What? This guy's a brutal communist dictator. I mean, it'd be difficult to find a better example of a brutal dictator than him. But now he's enamored here with Delcy Rodriguez, a self-avowed communist socialist who's under investigation by the DEA for narco violations. I mean, this is just too weird. It's just too weird. And what's even weirder is that Machado and her supporters won't criticize it. Oh, thank you, President Trump. And so Trump told her, he says, it's not safe there because it's so unstable. Well, what he didn't say is that what the problem is that it's the national security state there that will kill her, which he is there partnering with. I mean, that's where they kept this narco-terrorist regime in place. And some newspaper, it was either the Washington Post or the New York Times, maybe the Wall Street Journal, had an expose the last few days about a CIA informant there that was there that told the Trump administration that, you can't bring in the dissidents because they just won't mix with the national security state. Well, duh. That's the whole idea of a national security state, is that they're in charge. They wouldn't tolerate her. But instead of saying get rid of the national security state and let the election results stand, which I'm not advocating, I'm saying leave Venezuela alone. If you've done enough damage, just come home. But to work with this regime, a national security state regime, and say, well, it's stable. Well, yeah, every tyranny is stable. I mean, look at the Iranian regime. It's still stable. I mean, it's still in existence. It's weakened, but it's still, in terms of control. Would Trump say the same thing? Well, he might. If somebody popped up, if this new Ayatollah came and said, I'm willing to be the new Delcy Rodriguez for Iran. I'm willing to follow your orders. Just tell me what you want me to do. Yeah, I think everything would be fine. Okay. The whole thing's weird. And so it's going to be interesting to see what Machado does, though. I just cannot see her flying on a public flight, landing at the airport there and calling for a demonstration. I don't see what she's going to do. I mean, she could sneak back in. I bet you she's regretting having snuck out to go get her Nobel Prize, because what did it accomplish? I mean, she would have still been awarded the Nobel Prize, but at least she would have been hidden inside the country where she'd be relatively safer than to go back publicly and start leading protests and so forth. But clearly the U.S. is not going to protect her. She's on her own. If she flies in, she is on her own. And that was the message, in my opinion, that Trump and Rubio were giving her. We're not going to order you not to, but you're on your own when you get down there. And, don't cry to us if things go wrong. That to me is what was coming through loud and clear. Just my opinion, but we'll find out. So that's Trump Watch for this week. Thank you all for tuning in. And as always, thank you for your great support of the Future of Freedom Foundation. Talk to you soon.